Welcome everyone to DataGraph 5.0. This webinar is going to go over the basics of the user interface and how it's changed since the last version. And there are three main things that we're going to talk about. One is the online example interface and how that has changed. Two is the menu bar and how that's been updated and some new ways to be able to change the user interface. There's a new preferences panel also. So whether you're an existing user or a new user, these are some options that we're going to talk about that you may not be aware of for how you can customize the user interface. I'm also going to talk about the new toolbar, how those icons have changed, and how you can customize the toolbar if the way that we've added certain icons is not what you're looking for. But the new toolbar also gives you access to all of the data graph drawing commands in a way that I think is much easier and more transparent than it was before. Now, I just wanted to comment just a moment on, in general, for DataGraph 5.0, what our goal has been with this version. It's always a big deal to us when we get out a new version of the program. But the main thing for us was to really come up with some of these improvements that would make it easier for new users to step into DataGraph and really start immediately using the program, and also to make it easier for someone who's an existing user to really up their game and get into being a power user of DataGraph. With that, let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and talk about the online examples and how you use that interface. Now you should be seeing the online example window. This is the first thing that you see when you open up DataGraph and you open up version 5.0. And there's a couple of things that are different here that I want to point out. First, let me show you that there is an Open at Startup checkbox here. So if you may have unchecked this in the past, if you want to open this up or not have this open, you can change that setting. And if you don't have this opening up, you can go under the File Online Examples option to open this interface if it is closed. We call these the online examples because they exist online. If you don't have current connection to the internet, you won't be able to download these files. But that when you can download them, what it actually will do is it will, when you open a file, it will bring it down to your own desktop, and it will create a new instance of that file. So if you change the file, it's not going to change the version that's on the web. It's only going to change your local file. And these are files you can do whatever you want to do with them. If you want to change the data, you want to use this as a basis for something else you're making, these are for you to use to learn the program and to create graphics. First of all, on the left-hand side of this interface, you see there's a search bar. This is something we had in the last incarnation of this user interface, was the ability to search it. But what we didn't have before was the ability to filter based on the type of file. And this is where I think, in some ways, maybe this feels like not a huge change, but I do think it gives you so much more access to the type of files that you're looking at, and hopefully, again, makes learning the program a lot easier for new users. You can go right in here and click on basic, and you'll get just some basic graphs that use commands to draw different aspects of data. So for example, let me open up the first one here. You'll also notice that there is a size given for all of the files. For these basic files, these are going to be pretty small. You can see for recently uploaded files when it was uploaded in the category here. There is a gear menu on mine that you will not see on yours. That gives me the ability to upload these files and modify them, but that's not currently in the release version that you will have. Anyway, when I click upload, when I click open, you go ahead and see the file. It opens up. You can notice that it's untitled because, again, this is a new document that has this information in it. And these files are, again, this is a relatively simple file. There's just 2 columns of data. You can see there's one thumbnail where the sizing is automatic. And then here's another thumbnail here where we're illustrating the fact that you can set the size of the graph to some specific size that you want on output. So for example, here, this is 4 inches by 3 inches. And The description of the file is what you have over here on the left-hand side. That's what you see when you're navigating through. We also often have links and sources noted, as well as another file I'm going to show you has a lot more annotation in it to show you, to explain what's in the file. The other types of files that we have here are the analysis section. And I guess just a comment on the basic section probably will be relatively static compared to some of the other sections, but we are continuing to improve these files. You will therefore continue to see some changes even in the basic section. And if you have a suggestion for something that you think should be in there, definitely, we're always interested in hearing that. But this section on analysis will have more curve fitting, summary graphs of data and analysis of data, distributions. You can see here some box plots, scalar field, and therefore these are a bit more complicated, but intended to help to illustrate the commands that do data analysis within DataGraph. The layout section gives you graphs that have panel graphs and a variety of different types of layouts. You have two graphs here side by side, and again, goes into detail on various aspects of the changing the layout for when you're outputting graph for publication. The custom section has more custom graphics. It has graph types that are not necessarily commands within DataGraph, but are things that you can create. For example, a ternary diagram. Another one would be, say, a spider plot. This is something that there's no command for a spider plot, but you can use the machinery of DataGraph with a little bit of geometry in order to create graphs like this. And then the last category that we have here is called data sets. And in this category, you'll find examples that are from data sets that are, maybe a little more significant. Some of the basic files will also have data sets that we've downloaded, but these tend to be larger data sets, maybe a little more complicated, sometimes combine data from multiple sources. And I think what I'll do here is just open the first one here, Key West water temperature. And again, you can see the size of this file. This is 2.2 megabytes. Go ahead and open this one. And we'll use this to illustrate some of the other aspects of the program. The next things that I wanted to do is what I wanted to talk about was changes in the menu bar itself. And just so you can see, what is this file here that I'm showing you? This is a data that's from the water temperature in Key West, Florida. Shows some really nice warm temperatures. This is in degrees Fahrenheit. So if we were there right now, we'd be enjoying some very nice warm water and only getting warmer as the year goes on. This is sort of interesting data, though, because you see how there are these extreme temperatures that happen here. There's a break. I actually haven't had a chance to see what the issue is with the water temperature there. If something happened to the sensor, I don't know what it is. But what this file does is it takes this hourly data and then calculates summary statistics on that, calculating a daily mean, a monthly mean with error bars around that, and then overlaying those data on top of each other. So I won't go into the whole details of how this particular file is created. This is actually, I think, a pretty well annotated file, and actually maybe a good example of, again, what we're trying to go for with these files, because you can see over here on the right-hand side, this particular graph has an actual screenshot of one of the commands and gives you some information on how was this created, what are some of the key menu options that had to be chosen in order to create this type of a graphic from this data. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about again is changes in the menu bar itself. If we go up to the DataGraph menu bar, so all the way at the top, one of the first things that I wanted to point out is a new preferences panel. So if I open this up, this looks very different from before. And you have 3 sections here for the preferences panel. You have a function library. This is something I'm going to really talk about in more detail next week. I've created some categories for myself. And this is actually was a function library, something that had been requested a number of times. And we added a way to save functions, but this I think is much better. And it will also allow you to share files between users. So you can create a function library and share it with other people. Again, I'm not going to demo that in detail right now. We'll do that next week. But here's one option in terms of the user interface. This is a checkbox that will hide the thumbnail bar when you only have one graph. You may not have known that this option was here, depending on when you started using the program. In fact, the default for DataGraph used to be that whenever you created a brand new file, actually, I'll just go ahead and do a new one right now. So here, for example, is a brand new file. And if you look over on the left, there's one thumbnail here. But if you're only making one graph per file, this is a lot of screen real estate that you're taking up with that thumbnail. So if you go ahead and you check this box, then when you create new files, you won't have that bar at all, and it will give you more room at the top. As soon as you add a second graph, the thumbnail section of the user interface will pop up. Okay, so the next thing that you see here is also an option related to this is specific to the points command, and it gives you an option of setting the number of points that the program will switch from an actual point, an image, to just showing the pixel view. And this is important when you're doing scatter graphs and you have a lot of data, because if you have 1 million points that you're trying to show on your graph, that can actually really slow the program down. It's just too much to draw, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense to show that many points either. So what the program does is it has this automatic switching to just showing pixels on the screen, but you can change that. If you want this to be lower to go faster, or you want it to be higher. So I think what's great about this is it lets you do scatter graphs for millions of points of data, and because it will switch to this pixel view, it'll still be very fast. Okay, so that's one thing that we've changed. And I guess in terms of how this could evolve over time, the preferences panel, what you see is there's more room now to add other preferences. We've had users ask about setting up preferences in terms of the style settings and default colors. These are other things that now that we've modified the way that this panel works, that we can envision it having those types of options in here. So it doesn't yet, but that can be something that we work on in the future. The other part of the menu bar that I wanted to show you is under the View menu. And when you go under here, first thing to show you is this new option for swapping the layout. This is something that actually you have been able to do all along. But if I click this, then what you notice is now the data's on the right-hand side and all my commands are here on the left-hand side. Let me go ahead and actually close the column list over there so you can see this. In the past, the only way you had access to this option is actually using this swap button. So you'd click this at the bottom left of the data table, moves with the data table, and that's one way to get to it. But we recognize that it is a very handy thing to be able to do. And since it wasn't in the menu, we went ahead and add that into here. So you always can just do that from here. Okay, so let's keep going. What are the other options that you see here? So now you'll also, actually separate graph window was always there. If you didn't know it, then you could have that option of separating the graph window to view the graph window on a separate monitor, for example. But the thing that wasn't here before is called alternate screen mode. And when you hover over this, you see the pop-up that says this is useful for small monitors, and it changes the layout of the user interface. So I'll go ahead and change that. And what you see now is a completely different user interface. This is actually something that when it was first released, the first version that this came out of, it was the full screen mode of DataGraph for some amount of time. And then we decided that full screen mode would just be the normal interface, but some people really liked this way of using the program. And so we kept it in here as kind of an alternate mode. It had been under the Windows menu, but it really makes more sense to be under the View menu. Anyway, what happened when I did this? Well, what you'll notice is right now I see only the data, and the window itself is now hovering on top of DataGraph. And I can swap between just seeing the commands and just seeing the data. And notice you don't see the thumbnails here at all. If you would like to see them, you can click the checkbox to show the thumbnails. You have a checkbox to see the data definitions on the left-hand side. And the graph itself is something that you can either show or not show. So for small screens, I think this is very useful, but I know there's people who also really like this way of interacting with DataGraph who have larger screens. So, and again, this allows you to, I can take this and put it on a different monitor or just leave it there. So the one thing I will say is if you're doing an actual presentation, in case you haven't seen this before, I know I've demoed it before in some of these webinars, there is a very specific presentation mode that lets you present to a separate window that scales the images that you show in a more appropriate way for using Zoom, for example. So let me actually just undo the alternate screen mode, and I'll show you very quickly what that does. So if I go to View, Presentation Mode, and Present in Window, then now you see this individual window that is something that I can share through Zoom, just this one window. And up here, you see on this particular thumbnail, it shows you this icon with a computer on it. If I click here onto other screens, I can change what's in that window. Now, that window does not stay on top necessarily, so you can move that to another monitor for yourself. Anyway, there's more instructions on the presentation mode on the knowledge base. If you want to go online, you can search on that, and it's very useful. I think the presentation mode is a really cool thing. It actually, what's nice about it too, is it lets you make changes in your DataGraph file separate of what's being presented. So you can actually be behind the scenes, and you can even move between files. So you don't always have to present the same, you don't have to present graphs that are all in the same file. You can go into different files and present information. So I think that's pretty cool. The last thing that I just wanted to talk about is the toolbar icons themselves. In the past, in order to access all of the DataGraph drawing commands, you had to go under the command menu. And when you did, you have this, long list of commands. These are separated by, in general, the type of things that they do, the drawing commands that deal with data, commands that do more annotation. And we tried in the beta, we tried this a couple of different ways, but what we ended up settling on for the release version is to have these two new icons, draw and label. And these are actually pop-up menus that when you click on them, give you a list of drawing commands. The draw button gives you commands that really take in data and draw it or analyze it. You see how there's a small description next to each one. Again, so this is hopefully a way for people who are new to the program to get a better sense of what's available. And for people who've been here for a while, if you've never used some of these more advanced types of commands that weren't on the toolbar, gives you better access to them. And then all of the commands that are really more for annotation and labeling are under the label pop-up menu. one of the things that we did was to make sure that, say, if I swap my screen here, let me add a brand new file, that now when I click on these menus, they'll hover over to the opposite side of where the command list is. So also what's sort of nice here is that you can add multiple commands and you're not going to, this pop-up isn't going to go away. So this is, I think, an improvement over just using it in the command menu, because here, if you click something, the command menu closes. Here I can really, examine all the commands that I have available to me and then select them for my graph. And so the other part of this that is different is the fact that you don't see all of the same icons as before. So we continue to have these direct links to different drawing commands. The plot command, points, and fit, those commands were there before. There is one that we added to the default toolbar that didn't used to be there. This is the bar command. This is something that I have found very useful, and I think it's important to understand the difference between the bar and what the bars command does. I'm not going to go into detail on that now, but for all these commands, if you go under the draw menu, this is going to give you, again, quick access, not just to adding the commands, but this little question mark on the right-hand side. When you click that, it will bring up the help document for that particular command. Again, this is something that was available in the past on any command. If you just clicked on the gear menu, there was a link to the help document, but we're trying to make it, easier and more obvious where these things are located. So what else do we have here? We have the pivot command is still there, the legend command, and this part of the user interface has not changed from what it was before. However, if you look at this and you feel as though, there's some commands here that I really used to like using on a regular basis, and I would rather have direct access to them, this is something you can absolutely customize. So if you go to the toolbar itself and you do a command click or a right click, there's an option for customizing toolbar. And when you do that, you get this pop-up that has an icon for all the different toolbars that are there and allows you to very interactively add or remove items from your toolbar. And for example, if you're someone who uses the box command all the time, you can click on this and drag it and add it into your toolbar. There's also a way to add space. So you can see here, this is it says space, and you can click on this and drag this up into the toolbar and then offset different commands from one another. So you can really customize this quite a bit for the commands that you're interested in using. The text command or label command, for example, might be something that you use quite a bit. So I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, and if you change your mind and you decide you want to go back to the default toolbar the way that we had it set up, you can go ahead and drag this bottom part. So see, I'm clicking down here, drag this and drop that, and then it just resets everything back to the way that it was from the beginning. Also, if there's something here that we added that you're not interested in seeing, if you, for example, just don't use the pivot command, which I love the pivot command, so I'd recommend learning a little bit about it for summarizing data and grouping data. But if you don't need it and you don't want it in the default toolbar, you can just click and drag that away. You want to add it back again, you just click and bring it up here. And I believe, you can also rearrange. You see, I'm just dragging these various items around the toolbar. Let's see. So I think that is really what I wanted to cover for today.